Texans lose a nail biter. Sarge, how did it get to that point? We'll talk about that and more on today's show.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Locked On Texans fans, listeners, and viewers to this Monday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If this is your first time listening or watching the show, please subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you to all of our everydayers, our players from the Himalayas, for coming back to listen to Sarge and myself talk Texans. I'm your Texans football analyst, Johnson Sports Guy Hickman. On the other side of the screen, Texas Credential Media, Brian Big Sarge Bearfield. We got a lot to talk about today. How did this Texan team lose to the Green Bay Packers? How did it get down to a last-second field goal to win it for the Packers? The ghost of the second half returns, struggling to score points. Sarge, I know you're fueling it on fire to talk about that, but we do got to give credit where credit is deserved, and that's the Texans defense, because they did everything in their power to keep this game close for the Houston Texans. Today's episode is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Right now, if you go to hillsdale.edu/lockedon, you can enroll for free. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. Sarge, how did this game come down to the final seconds of the fourth quarter field goal to win it for the Green Bay Packers?
John, I could say that I could talk about the offensive play calling. I could talk about the offensive line. I could talk about CJ not having a good game. You know what, John? Let me stop right there. It was the offensive play calling and the time management at the end of the game, and we'll get to that in just a second. But this offensive play calling that went on today, John, mixed in with the offensive line, I want to take us right to the end of the game. That last drive was so beautiful. Like, they did exactly what they were supposed to do until they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
CJ converts on third down to Xavier Hutchinson, and they pick up their first down. They're getting steam. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And you get there, and then all of a sudden you run the ball on first down, you make them call a timeout. You run the ball on second down, you make them call a timeout. And then you pass the ball instead of letting the clock run and making them use their last timeout, and you pass the ball and you play for a field goal. I did not like the way that the game was so conservative. Now, let me rewind just for a second, because I took us all the way to the fourth quarter. Let me tell you how we got there, John. We got there because the Houston Texans offense could not put together the game plan to whereas the run game and the passing game could go hand in hand. You know how we've said this for weeks, John, that the running game is supposed to open up the passing game. And on Sunday, the running game was on par. The running game was superb. But the passing game could never seem to go. And, John, for the life of me, I can't understand how much longer are we going to keep making excuses for this offensive line not to be able to pick up stunts? How many times are we going to keep making excuses for this offensive line not to understand the mixing and the matching and calling out the protections and showing where, there's a free defensive player or move the protection over? CJ can't do it all. CJ can't switch the protection all the time. That's the job of one, Juice Scruggs, and then the rest of the offensive line. And so how we got there, John, is CJ was running for his life the entire day. CJ never felt comfortable in the pocket. And with him not feeling comfortable in the pocket, John, that led to a lot of inaccurate throws. Yeah. Some throws we're not used to seeing CJ making, and some quick decision making, because he doesn't want to keep taking those hits. Listen, for as much as we praise C.J. Stroud about being the next coming, as much as we talk about him, if he stays on the trajectory that he is, he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Hopefully he can bring a couple of Super Bowls to the Houston Texans franchise. As much as we talk about that, as much as we talk about the future with C.J., he's still a quarterback who is still learning the game. And if you keep getting him hit like this, you don't want to turn C.J. Stroud into David Carr.
Oh my gosh, you don't want to turn him into a gunshot quarterback where he's scared back there. And I think that's a great point, Sarge. When we look at what went wrong for the Houston Texans, first I want to highlight what went right. Joe Mixon being the only offensive bright spot for this Texans offense, 115 yards on the ground, 2 TDs. What went right? Guys that stepped up like they were supposed to. Neville Hewitt and Jake Hansen combined for 16 tackles. Neville Hewitt had a big interception on the Packers' opening play. Tim Settle had a big game with Mario Edwards out. Tommy Townsend had a big game for the Texans, which I think really helped his defense get some good field position. So, we got to look at what went right for the Houston Texans. And I mean, overall, I think they've had the best day possible considering defensively the amount of starters being out. They held the second best rushing team in the NFL to under 100 yards. Now, granted, I think a lot of that was due to the Packers' game plan, but still, they did not reach 100 yards on the ground. 2 interceptions, 3 sacks, and in between the last Packers touchdown that allowed them to go up 21-19, they forced 3 drives that ended in punts, 10 plays for -1 yard. So, things went right for the Houston Texans that had absolutely nothing to do with the offensive line and communication and protection. And Sarge, when I look at this game, 2 things that really stood out. To your point, I'm going to piggyback off of it. This Texans offensive line is still the worst I've seen against blitz and stunts this year. The communication between those guys is still a problem, and I think it will continue to be a problem until there's a change made, whether that's to the coaching staff or whether that's to one of those players out there that's starting 5. Right?
Maybe time to shake it up, John. It may be
time to shake it up.
Yeah, no. I was just gonna say it may be time to shake it up, John. Because for whatever reason, we cannot keep using the excuse. I know that I've given them a pass throughout the first 5 weeks about the continuity issue with Kenyon Green coming back playing after sitting out a year of. I'm sorry, not sitting out, but being injured for a year. And him coming back, and Juice Scruggs still learning to play the center position in the NFL. I know that I've given them a pass, but at some point, it's time to take that next step. You can't keep leaning on that. And what these defensive coordinators are doing is realizing that the Houston Texans offensive line as a whole has an issue, John. I'm going to tell you where it started from. The Chicago Bears exposed that.
Yeah,
the Chicago Bears exposed how weak the Houston Texans offensive line is to stunts and blitzes.
And this is the most expensive offensive line in the NFL.
Oh wow!
Your quarterback is fighting for his life, trying to pick up a first down. He does. He gets popped on the sideline. He starts joining a little bit with the Packers, and I don't see not one offensive lineman show up to his aid. This is in the fourth quarter, where the offensive line has been getting beat down physically from a physical standpoint and mentally from the lack of communication and mentally being able to win. They've been getting beat down. CJ Stroud is still trying to win this game. The game is in reach. They were only down 2 at that point, and not one offensive lineman comes over there to the aid of their quarterback. That's a problem for me. It may not be a problem for other people, but that's a problem for me, Sarge and listeners. Those issues, again, like you said, led to CJ being pressured on half of his dropbacks and a season low of 86 yards after being the league's best passing offense so far. Pair that with the fact that at no point do I think Bobby Slowick helped this team on passing downs to have plays to beat those blitzes. Guys couldn't get open downfield, and CJ was also missing some of those throws that I think we have accustomed to see him make some of those. Wow, how did he make those throws? Today was just one of those days where, like the Minnesota Vikings, a good team punched the Houston Texans in the mouth offensively, and they were not able to respond through the air. The passing attack for Houston was contained like we haven't seen so far this year.
And John, the one thing that really, really, and I said this, one thing that really perplexes me, right? The one thing that really baffles me, and for those of you all who don't know what perplex or baffle means, the one thing that kind of made me upset and confused me as I was watching the game, John, even with all of that, they still had an opportunity to win the game at the end.
Right.
And you get the offensive line to start protecting just enough. And as soon as they start doing that, they get close enough to – they don't even take shots towards the end zone.
You remember the last time we watched that? We were at home. It was me, you, Miss Kim, and AD. And against the Jacksonville Jaguars, right before they scored their touchdown, we all looked at each other because the sequencing of plays were confusing and said, are they playing for the 3?
Yes.
You can afford to do that a little bit with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And again, that was wrong. But when you're going up against an offense led by Jordan Love, Matt LaFleur on the sideline, and this team has been responding to you every time that you respond back to them, you got to go for the touchdown. Yeah. Again, sequencing the plays for Bobby Sloak, you add that on the fact that, listen, has he been able to beat blitzes this year from a play caller standpoint?
He has not.
Flores embarrassed the Houston Texans, and now again on Sunday, same issues.
And John, here's my thing too. This is where I'm gonna throw some of the blame on head coach DeMeco Ryans. I get it. You run the defense, you let Bobby do his thing. You run the defense, you let Bobby do his thing. John, I'm gonna take you back to a play that should have made DeMeco say, okay, if we get down in a situation like this, I'm going to have to pull Bobby to the side and say, hey, you have got to call the right place, and we have to get this thing done. John, after they scored the touchdown and they went for the 2-point conversion, the first play that they ran, the one that they got the pass interference on with Diggs, that was a horrible play.
That was the play where they only used two players to run routes.
That was a horrible play.
Terrible play. Agreed.
You move, you get the penalty, you move closer, and instead of having Joe Mixon close enough to the line where he can just burst through, you have him at his normal depth like you're at the 40-yard line, and you're giving him and you got him so far back. When you know that your offensive line has been getting beat up front, like a lot of those runs that Joe Mixon had on Sunday was due to cutbacks or him just being angry and aggressive. Yeah, what I say, Joe Mixon. My bad.
No, I'm saying due to him being Joe Mixon.
Yes, him being Joe Mixon. But John, on that play, you have him so far in the backfield. Now CJ has to go back, hand him the ball, right? And before he could even take 2 steps, John, the defender was right there. Why didn't you have him closer to the line? And so you, in that failed 2-point conversion right there, that should have let you know, hey, if we get down and we get close and we do this, we're going to have to call something else. John, there wasn't even any – with the way that Joe Mixon was running on Sunday, on that last offensive sequence that they had, why wasn't there any play action? Like, Bobby totally wet the bed, and DeMeco got to take some responsibility for that as well.
They got to take some responsibility and look at the fact that 19 points in the first half, 3 points in the second half. Sorry, that's not going to cut it. So we're going to talk about the ghost of the second half when we return back to the Locked On Texans podcast. And this is also a great time to let you guys know that BetterHelp is here for you. You can need help because Bobby Sloak ain't calling the right plays or the offensive line ain't blocking like they're supposed to, or you could just need help because life gets to lifing. Today's show is sponsored by BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suitable to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get started and get matched with a licensed therapist anytime and switch anytime for no additional charge. Overcome fears with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. And also, guys, Hillsdale College is hooking y'all up right now. They got free classes, free courses, over 40 free courses that they are offering right now online for free. You can look at some of those courses and attend the Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, the Great American Story, A Land of Hope course, and they have so much more that they're offering. All of Hillsdale courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or if you're like me, you just maybe want to enjoy the lectures. Go to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. I feel like this is one of those moments where when you know somebody has the hot hand, you got to feed them.
Yep.
And Sarge, when I look at the Texans offense, 19 points, very competitive in that first half. Thanks to Joe Mixon once again. I thought that they would make adjustments, which is something that we really have rarely seen from Bobby Slowick this year. I thought they would make adjustments to the offense to come out and find ways to go up against the defense to, at that point, was getting the better of them in terms of being able to get the balls down the field, but they were not able to. 3 points in their second half, Sarge. The issues return back.
Right. And let me tell you the last 5 offensive possessions for the Houston Texans in the second half. Punt, hold on. Net yards -3. Net yards 5. Net yards 22. Net yards 11 yards. So punt, 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 punt. And then they had a 13-play drive for 41 yards and kicked the field goal, right? They kicked the field goal to put them up 22-21. John, I'm going to go back over this one more time. Last 5 possessions. Punt, 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 field goal. Hey, where have we heard that before? I think that was the same storyline not too long ago when they played against the Buffalo Bills that they played, and that was the last 5 drives. They had punt, 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 field goal. I mean, I've seen it earlier this year. I've seen a similar stat line like that.
And I think Chicago, that was almost a part of Chicago's game too.
And what I can't understand, John, is last week you came out in the second half, you scored 27 points. This week you come out and you score, let me put it like this. You look at the Green Bay Packers, and I'm not taking anything away from the Green Bay Packers. That defense stepped up. But last week, and we discussed this on the podcast before, last week they did not sack Kyler Murray at all. Had 8 quarterback pressures. And then you turn around and you look, and now they're constantly under pressure. They can't. Four punts, John. 4 punts in 5 offensive possessions. That's horrible. I'm sorry. That's horrible for an offense that is led by C.J. Stroud and has Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs. John, they have an issue and they have a problem, and somebody's going to have to do it. Somebody's going to have to address it. I don't know how you talk to Bobby and tell him whatever you're doing in these second halves, it's not getting it done. And John, when you go through a first half of football, you go in and you make the necessary adjustments for the second half. What I think is what's happening is, and I know we talked about the offensive line. We know what the offensive line is, we know what they're capable of, and we know what they're doing. But it's left up to you as an offensive coordinator to say, all right, I can't keep doing this. I think that some of the plays that Bobby is showing, these defensive coordinators are used to it, have seen it before. You've taken this out of the Shanahan playbook. They know every option on some of these plays, and they're taking them all away. So now it's your time, Bobby. It's your time. Because, let me say this, when Kyle Shanahan is calling these plays, and when he's calling these plays with the 49ers, who is he calling for? Jimmy G, right? Brock Purdy? Neither one of those have the talent of a C.J. Stroud. And look, shout outs to, former Locked On Texans co-host Cody M. Davis. Him and I talked about this earlier today. And Cody has said this, so I'm really just regurgitating and repeating what Cody has said, is that you have a talented quarterback in C.J. Stroud that you have to build around. John, I'm going to be honest with you. One of the problems that the Houston Texans had when they had Deshaun Watson here was that Bill O'Brien said, we're going to run this offense whether you like it or not. They're not building an offense around him. In Baltimore, they built the offense around Lamar Jackson. In Kansas City, they built the offense around Patrick Mahomes. And I'm sorry, it does not look like Bobby is building this offense around CJ and his talents.
So, you know what I have a problem with? And I'm going to ask you if you're seeing it as well. It doesn't seem like he understands how to utilize the players that he has on their roster in their skill position.
He may have too much talent, John.
And you know what? If that is the excuse, then there's a problem. Because I'm sorry. And he did a good job blocking as a receiver, but you got to find a way to get John Mitchell the ball in the flats, right? Yeah. I mean, And Quay Walker goes down. So they
Yes.
already had issues with their linebacker room in terms of how they were able to kind of guard in their passing defense for the Packers. Quay Walker went down for a moment, and I'm not seeing John Mechie get involved. I think that, and CJ missed him on one of those plays, but find a matchup for Xavier Hutchinson to exploit and allow it to be quicker than what it's been. I mean, and another thing, hey, Dalton Schultz, I thought was doing well. He started that drive off on the first one where they scored 3 points, and then you don't hear from him again.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's by design or he's not getting open. We got to go back and watch the film, but the fact remains is with the amount of talent that's on this roster, Nico goes down, and honestly, I don't think it should be that much of a big drop. I mean, he is the best receiver in the league right now in terms of numbers, but when you got a talented room like you have, you got to find ways to maximize those strengths, and I think that's where Bobby has failed so far. I'm not calling him a failure altogether, but what I am saying is the inconsistency in play calling, the inconsistencies in play sequencing, and the inconsistencies in being able to allow guys to maximize their strengths from the sideline as a play caller, that has really hurt Bobby Slowick, and I think the perception of him. I think this Shanahan offense that's being ran in Houston is very watered down, but I also think it's hindered the Houston Texans offense. There's no way you're supposed to score 3 points in the second half. Kudos to the Green Bay Packers defense. I mean, they came to play all 4 quarters. They punched the Houston Texans in the mouth at various times, but 3 points in the second half is ridiculous.
But John, and that's my point. That's my point. 3 points in the second half on Sunday. 3 points in the second half in prior games. 3 points in the second half prior games. 7 points in prior games. Like there was a 1 point stretch where there was 3 games that they had only scored 13 points in the second half. And so you revert back to that and you only scored 3 points in the second half against the Green Bay Packers. John, what I meant by he may have too much talent, it may be too much talent for a play caller who hasn't called plays but 26 games in a total of 26 games in the NFL. And there isn't a lot of first-year offensive coordinators, second-year offensive coordinators that get this amount of talent at this time who's never called plays before. You're looking at talent. You're looking at talent on a team that is mostly coached by offensive coordinators who have been in the league for a while. Like, I'm going to use this for an example, right? So when you look at, let's just say the Washington Commanders, right? Cliff Kingsbury has been a head coach. Cliff Kingsbury has been an offensive coordinator, and he knows what type of talent he has in Jaden Daniels, and he knows the type of talent he has on that team, and he utilizes it. But he has the experience. And this isn't giving Bobby a pass. This is just saying maybe the lights are too bright for you, Bobby, and maybe it's time to call on Gerard. Maybe get Gerard Johnson involved and say, hey, what are you seeing, Gerard? How can I help CJ be better? How can I build this offense around CJ?
Preach.
Because one thing I know Bobby didn't do was read his own press clippings on how good he was last year and got some head coaching consideration. Because we're looking at now, they talk about players going through sophomore slumps.
Yeah.
Bobby going through a sophomore slump himself.
CJ and Gerard Johnson are very close as his quarterback coach, but they are very close. And I just want to reiterate, Dalton Schultz 2 targets.
Wow.
Cade Stover 1 target. Hutchinson 1 target. Tank 4 targets. Now Tank does he got to come down with that touchdown at the back of the end zone.
Oh,
he dropped.
He got to,
and I know he's gonna want that one back, but overall, this offense looked like an offense that did not have the number 1 receiver in the NFL. And I think what Sarge and I are both saying is there's too much talent in that receiver room for it to look like that in second halves of these games. When we come back, we got to talk about how the Texans defense gave they all, Sarge. They gave everything that they had to keep this game close. So we got to give them some credit. I also want to give y'all some credit in a sense because FanDuel is hooking you up like they've been doing all year. Right now, for new customers, you'll get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So while you're sitting on the couch checking out some of those live stats, play-by-play, you can also do all of that and much more and place bets on FanDuel. Again, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. All you have to do is place your first $5 bet. Shout out to FanDuel. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Before we close out, Sarge, listen, I thought Neville Hewitt played amazing for Houston. This all last week, I talked about, man, how is Jalen Petrie going to compete against the slots for specifically for Jaden Reed, but how is he going to compete in coverage for the Houston Texans? And Jaden Reed only had 10 yards. I thought he did a very good job out there on the field. And Kalen Bullock, man, the rookie, with some Air Jordan type moves to get an interception.
Yeah.
The weekend show, I said the guys that's been out there has to play like they've been out there. Will Anderson had a sack. Danielle Hunter had a sack. Tim Settle balled out, so he backed up the smoke that he gave out. We didn't hear a lot of Derek Stingley today. That's a good thing. Kalen Bullock did his thing out there today. I think for the Houston Texans, though, moving forward, because this is something that I also think aided to why the Texans lost, they got to go find some secondary help. The trade needs to happen. The trade needs to happen. Say one more time. The trade needs to happen. Eric Murray is good in the role that he needs to be playing in. On Sunday, he was exploited because he was out there too much. Going up against a betting passing offense, just offense all around. And D'Angelo Ross is who D'Angelo Ross is. I was kind of upset that we didn't see more. Maybe you mentioned Troy Brown, Miles Brown out there, because maybe Miles Brown would have given them a better look. But they were picking on Ross. Outside of that, I mean, listen, they held this team. When we look at the crunch part of that game, like I mentioned, the last 3 drives, punts, 10 plays for -1 yards.
Yeah.
The defense gave the Houston Texans offense a chance to win it late. They just were not able to put up the points that they needed to do.
Yeah. And John, I will say this, coming into this game, I said it repeatedly that the Houston Texans could not use injuries as an excuse. They had to have that next man up mentality. Head coach D'Amico Ryans has always been one that has prided himself on being able to develop players, develop talent, help players with talent go to the next level. And we've seen that. Listen, Jake Hansen did not have a bad game. And even though that there was a touchdown pass to the running back, that was still Josh Jacobs in the open field is very hard to try to cover. And especially for someone who hasn't had the amount of reps needed to cover a running back like that out of the backfield. And so I can't, knock him for giving up that touchdown pass to Josh Jacobs. But what I will say is Neville Hewitt played like Neville Hewitt, that was a New York Jets Neville Hewitt. Remember when he was a starter with the New York Jets? He played like that. And one of the things that I thought that he would get exploited in was pass coverage, and he really didn't. I mean, let's go to the last drive by the Green Bay Packers. He actually tipped the ball, the one where I thought Eric Murray was going to come up with the interception. He comes up with that interception, game over. Now we're talking about the Texans getting another ugly win. But Neville Hewitt got his hands on that ball. Listen, when Jalen Petrie tipped the pass on the first drive of the Packers, he tipped the pass, and look who came up with the ball, Neville Hewitt, and put him into good field position. And so I like the way that those linebackers stepped up. D'Angelo Ross it was pretty much expected. I'm surprised that the New England Patriots didn't pick on him more last week, like the Green Bay Packers was doing on Sunday. And I like the way that Tim Settle Jr. played. I like the way Danico Autry played. I like the way that Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter played. Danielle had 7 pressures and a sack. Will had 4 pressures and a sack. And I mean, they were getting to him, making him uncomfortable. And John, they kept getting the ball back for the offense. And I know I don't want to keep harping on the offense, but how many times is the defense going to have to go out there and do their job, get you the ball back, and then you say, this ain't good now, we don't want to be out here, y'all come on back out here.
Right.
And so that defense stepped up, the defense played and did what they were supposed to do. And at the end of the day, there was nothing else that they could really do.
Nah, and I will say, for Danielle Hunter, one of those pressures near sack helped cause the Kalen Bullock interception. That right amount of pressure kind of made Jordan Love fade a little bit when he threw the ball. And Kalen Bullock, again, I mean, he just Air Jordan that thing, came out of nowhere with the interception. I really like the rookie for the Texans. We're going to talk Texans throughout the week, guys. I think this game kind of allowed us to see a little bit more into the soul of the Houston Texans and who they are. And right now, I have no question marks for that defense. But I can't say the same for the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I can't either.
Yeah. Thank you guys for watching today's show. Please subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Give me a follow on Twitter at John_Hickman12.
And you can follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at the Big Star Sports with a Z at the end.
Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.